Hey everyone, Vincenzo Calla here. Welcome to episode 9 of Let's Discuss Politics. Today I'm glad to be joined by the Liberal MPP for Orléans, Stephen Blais. Stephen is a lifelong resident of Ottawa's East End. He was first elected to represent the riding of Orleans back in February 2020. Before becoming the MPP, Stephen served as an Ottawa Catholic School Board trustee from 2006 to 2010. Then he served as the Ottawa City Councillor for Cumberland Ward from 2010 to 2020, where he spent lots of time bringing more infrastructure to Orleans. He's involved in his community and has served on many community initiatives. Thank you, Stephen, for joining me today.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
I'm happy to have you here today. I'm on a quest to interview all the Ottawa area MPPs ahead of the next election in June. So I'm great to have you here as my second Ottawa area MPP. So we're going to start with the first segment, which is called Stephen's Story, where we'll talk about your political history. So the first question is, when did you first get involved in politics?
Well, I guess if by getting involved, you mean actually participating in an active way on a campaign and that kind of thing, I guess it would be in university. It was for the provincial Liberal nomination. This would have been at the end of 2002, preparing for the eventual 2003 general election. So that was the first time I was, actively involved. But I would say my interest in politics started when I was a teenager. My grandmother was, and my grandfather, unfortunately, I never got to know. They were both big organizers for the Liberal Party in Ottawa Centre and the Glebe. And so there was always a lot of, talk about politics, at Christmas dinner and family dinners and that kind of thing. And when I was in grade 7, I guess, I started delivering the Ottawa Citizen every morning. This was back when people still read newspapers in hard copy. And, when it's 6 o'clock in the morning and you're walking around the neighborhood for an hour delivering papers, you tend to actually read it a little bit. And so I started to read the newspaper, and that's actually, through that time, that's when, the 93 election was pretty important, because that was the emergence of the Reform Party and the Bloc Québécois, and that all led into the Quebec referendum in 1995. And so that whole period really got me very interested in, and eventually very involved in the political process.
Well, that's an interesting story for sure. I mean, there's so many ways that people get to politics, and obviously you had your family who talked a lot about politics, but it's just interesting to see how, just as a young child, pretty much you read the newspaper and got involved through there and just kind of paid attention and looked at that, and that's how it all started. So it's interesting how we all get to politics in our own way. So I'm going to go into the next question, which is, why did you decide to run for the position you hold, which is the MPP for Orleans?
Yeah, so, as you mentioned in the intro, I had been a school trustee and a city councillor for almost a decade. And we'd been able to get some really big things done in Orleans, from a road perspective, from a recreation perspective, with Millennium Park and the François Dupuis Center. Orleans is the only suburb that's going to get the electric light rail as part of stage 2 in all of Ottawa. That was a huge accomplishment. And you're from Ottawa, so you know that often Orleans feels that it doesn't get the same kind of investment and attention as other parts of the city. So being the only suburb to get the electric train in stage 2 was a huge accomplishment. And then this was in the spring of 2019, our member of parliament, Andrew Leslie, announced that he was not going to seek re-election. And so our member of provincial parliament at the time, Marie-France Lalonde, decided to run, and she won the Liberal nomination and eventually became our member of parliament. And so this created the midterm opening for MPP. That was an interesting spring and summer. That was our second spring of floods. Cumberland had been very affected by floods in 2019 and 2017. So it's been a great deal of time in the community helping residents with those floods. The LRT program was well underway, and stage 2 was effectively guaranteed. And so And then when I looked at so that important project was, on a very secure pathway to success. And so when I looked at what was left in Orleans, what we needed to focus some big attention on, it was things like schools. We had grown, the community in New Orleans has grown tremendously, lots of new neighborhoods and subdivisions and new neighbors, and that's fantastic. I live in a relatively new neighborhood myself, but I didn't feel that the attention to schools, the construction of new schools was keeping pace with, how many new people were moving into the neighborhood. And obviously that's a provincial issue. Healthcare, local healthcare was important. We've have the Orleans Health Hub, which has just recently opened in the last month or two. But if you live in Orleans, most people don't have a family doctor in Orleans. Most people, their family doctors, maybe downtown, maybe it's out in Gloucester. It wouldn't surprise me if some people travel out to Nepean to see their family doctor. There is a gap in Orleans for family doctors. We don't have, Orleans is a community of families, of growing children. Growing kids break their bones. They break their wrist, they break their leg, they do stuff, they get hurt. We don't really have a place other than going to CHEO to deal with that. We have a small urgent care, but if it's anything kind of beyond maybe stitches, you really end up having to go all the way to CHEO. And so there is a big gap from a healthcare perspective in Orleans. And so when I looked at all those things, I looked at my own family, where we were. My son's transitioning to high school. You probably know, Vincenzo, that I have a health condition that's pretty serious. My parents are getting older and absorbing more healthcare and all the things that come with that. The issues that we were talking about as a family that were affecting us every day were really issues at the provincial level. And so it just felt like it was the issues that were becoming more and more important to me were provincial issues. The opening happened, and it just felt like that was the opportunity to represent my community at that level.
Well, you had obviously accomplished a lot in your almost a decade. It was about maybe close to 9.5 years probably that you were the counselor. And obviously, as you have a family as well, and you got to see what was important. So it's very important that that the people that are running for the right reasons. And obviously you see what's going on, you are affected by these issues. So that is so important on running for basically that. So we're going to go into the next segment, which is called Serving as an Elected Official, where we'll talk about your experiences and achievements as an elected official. So what is your favorite part about serving your community as an elected official?
I guess it's really getting out and about and getting exposed to all the aspects of your community. I think most of us, and in fairness, I was like this before I was electivist. Most of us stick pretty close to home, right? We might commute to work somewhere, but in terms of our life, our family life, our individual lives, we've got our little neighborhood. We know our maybe immediate neighbors. We go shopping at the local grocery store that's around the corner from our house, and the park that's nearby and things like this. But most of us don't investigate or travel too far afield of a certain radius around where we actually go to bed every night. And so as an elected official, you're forced, if you want to be good, if you want to get reelected or elected in the first place, you're forced to go out and explore the other parts of your community that you might not see all the time. You get to meet people that you don't have regular exposure to. You get to see the service clubs like the Lions and Kiwanis and Rotary and the Optimist clubs, the kind of work that they do in the community. You get to visit all the churches and the mosques and the synagogues and the temples, and get to understand people that are different from you. What's important to them and their families, and what they want to achieve, and how the government is helping or hurting them do that, right? And so that's really the most fun thing for me. And then it obviously, when you get to do something big, when I first got elected, there was no plan to bring light rail to Orleans, not just kind of soon, but really ever. And as we're speaking here today, anyone who drives down Highway 174 can see that LRT is very much under construction to Orleans. We got Millennium Park expanded. So we have a brand new, not just a turf football and soccer field, but we've basically got a stadium there.
That's a wonderful field. That's a
it can
wonderful
hold
field.
like 1,500 people. We had an amazing high school game between the two rival Catholic schools a couple of years ago. We did it on a Friday night under the lights. It was packed. You could hear the crowd roaring from kilometers away. It was really a way to, so anyways, the park has really brought kind of community together, and it's got the best splash pad in all of Ottawa. So if you like to stay cool on a hot summer's day, it's a great place to bring the kids, and well, even adults like to go underneath the dunk every once in a while. So accomplishing big things like that Millennium Park is great. It brings people together. It gives kids a place to play and puts a smile on people's face, and that's very rewarding. And then something like light rail is going to change Orleans forever, right? Not just transportation, but in 30 years from now, you're going to see condos and office buildings and all sorts of development along that corridor that really wouldn't happen without it. And it will really change the shape of how Orleans grows, and Ottawa. Instead of just taking up farmland for more and more subdivision, you'll start to see a more intense type of development and give people an opportunity to stay in Orleans as they age. They can sell their house and buy a condo or rent an apartment to stay close to the grandkids, but still stay in Orleans and not have to travel, say, to downtown or Westboro or something like that to find an apartment to live in.
Well, those are some really good things about so many growing communities. And I mean, Orleans is definitely still a growing community. There's lots of communities growing there. And we'll continue to touch on that in the next question. And we've already touched on it a lot. You've touched on it a lot. But quickly, if you could say, what is your favorite achievement as an elected official?
Yeah, I think so. I guess my favorite one is probably Millennium Park, as I was talking about. It's just, it's fun, right? It's a park, it's a splash pad, it's sports fields. I'm a big sports enthusiast. My son plays football now. So the other day he was actually playing at the turf field and made an amazing catch. And it's just an exciting place, to be with your family. So I would say my favorite from a fun perspective is probably that one. The biggest one is light rail. As I mentioned before, it's going to dramatically change the face of Orleans for a very, very, very long time. And then I guess, next to both of those will be the Francois Dupuis Center. The Francois Dupuis pool was the first new indoor pool in the city of Ottawa in 20 years. It's basically since amalgamation. It was the first of the 3 rec centers that got built. And then we built an addition onto it. And then beside it, it hasn't been realized yet. It's perhaps the only kind of important project that I left undone. The city owns a huge piece of land right beside there that I had gotten designated as a park, effectively. And so the opportunity to build a whole new Millennium Park, it's the same size more or less. But instead of it being sports fields, it will be a covered outdoor hockey rink and tennis courts and a toboggan hill. We don't have any toboggan hills in Orleans. This thing will have a toboggan hill in it and a BMX track and, obviously walking paths and trees and an edible forest. And so, laying the groundwork for that, even though we haven't achieved it yet, laying that groundwork, I think was also pretty important and fun.
Well, that's really cool. And obviously there's gonna be a lot more things, especially as the next election is rolling around. There's gonna be a lot for you to achieve in the next election and in the next terms of government. So definitely cool things happening there and lots of things coming up. So for the last segment, it's politics are all around us, where we'll talk about the world of politics around us, and we'll go over these questions quickly. So the first question is, who is or who was another politician that inspires you?
Well, growing up, it was, I guess it was Pierre Trudeau. I kind of grew up on the tales of Pierre Trudeau. My cousin served in Pierre Trudeau's cabinet, and my grandmother, that's when she was kind of active in organizing for political campaigns. So I got a lot of exposure then. And then, you're too young to remember this and maybe even to know it at all, Vincenzo, but there was, Pierre Trudeau's, one of his biographies was called Memoirs, and there was a documentary series that was produced about this. And so, that kind of all came out and was on television as I was, coming into politics and experiencing politics as I was describing before, and the whole Quebec referendum. I think Jean Chrétien is as a politician, as a tactician, even though he can sometimes be difficult to understand when he's speaking, as a communicator, I think he is probably the best we've had in my lifetime, right up there with Pierre Trudeau. Trudeau was good for zingers and quips, and obviously he's very smart, but I think there's just something about Chrétien as a political operator, a small guy from Shawinigan, that I think is pretty compelling. And so I would say, I never had the opportunity to meet Pierre Trudeau. I've met Mr. Chrétien a number of times, and so I guess he would eke out the win on that one, because I've had a chance to meet and speak to him a little bit.
Well, that's really cool, especially when there's former prime ministers that are still around and still speaking at events. And we saw in the election, Jean Chrétien was speaking at events, and it's really cool to have political figures that you look up to, especially you and all your other colleagues from across party lines and in your party, to look up to as MPs and MPPs and councillors and all that. So the last question is, what do you think is an issue that needs to be focused on more?
Oh, there are a lot. I think obviously COVID has really changed almost everything in our lives, right? And it's obviously been a really tough, we're coming up on 2 years. But for me, I think COVID has really highlighted the challenges, how burned out people were in the daily grind, right? You go to work, if you're lucky, you've got a 9-to-5 job. A lot of people have to work a lot more than that. But even on the 9-to-5, there's Dalton McGuinty talked about this. We live just in time lives. We arrive at work just in time for work, and we get home just in time to get the kids off the school bus, just in time to get them a snack, just in time to get them to soccer practice or ballet or piano. We get them home just on time to have a bath, and then there's just enough time to maybe do some homework before it's bed. And then, you're exhausted at the end of all that. Maybe you have a couple minutes with your spouse before you hit the sack, and then you're waking up just in time to start it all over again. And I think COVID has really brought that to the forefront and really kind of exploded that. One, for people who didn't have time off, or time at work, or time at home, I should say, for COVID, who still went to work and were working their backsides off, trying to keep the rest of us with groceries in our pantries and all those essentials. But for those who had to work from home, we've all, I think, complained a little bit about, having everyone on top of each other all the time was maybe a little bit stressful and too much from time to time. But at the same time, I think we've all come to realize the flexibility that afforded us was nice, that the time, despite some of the occasional additional stress from it all, the additional time with your kids or your spouse was nice. And so I think talking about how we can continue to be a successful society and have a strong economy and have an efficient workforce without burning ourselves out, I think is going to be really important. That's, you may have seen, we've just announced that, should we form government, we want to explore the 4-day work week, with a pilot project. And that really goes in line with that. How can we ensure that we continue to be in obviously a successful and efficient and dynamic economy and place to live and raise a family, but we want to be able to work in order to live, not live simply to work. And we need to get that figured out.
Especially after the pandemic, it's just like you mentioned, it's just we have to get back to figuring out how we live our lives again, really, and that work-life balance again. We have to figure that out in a different way, and it's just so interesting to see. And especially as your leader has put out, that'll be very interesting to see how that plays out, especially if you do form government. It's definitely a good idea that I think would work well. It would be interesting to see how it works. So
Yeah.
that is all for today. Thank you, Stephen, for joining me today. If you like today's interview, make sure to check out my other interview with Stephen on Instagram for Top 5 and 5. If you're watching this at the time of the premiere, it will be coming out on Friday. So to stay updated, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at VC Productions 25. Check out my website at vincenzocalla.com and make sure to like, subscribe, and choose to get notifications here on YouTube. Let's Discuss Politics is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.